welcome back to another vlog. This is Llamas with Hats, commissioned vlog by Benny Blue. Thanks for backing, Benny. So yeah, Llamas with Hats. It's kind of a classic web cartoon thing. Goes back almost a decade. Finished up a couple years ago, I think. 12 episodes. It's pretty standard example of like late 2000s, early 2010s internet humor. It's inherited from the late 90s, early 2000s internet. A lot of non sequitur, a lot of just bizarre out of nowhere stuff, a strong influence from nonsense. So you have juxtapositions of things that normally would not go together. For example, talking animals we tend to associate with like childhood stuff for children. And here we have them engaging in, violence and murder and all that kind of thing, which we normally don't have much of, certainly not to that level, in children's entertainment. At the same time, that particular juxtaposition with extreme violence is very late 2000s. It's Charlie the Unicorn, all that kind of thing. Shock humor. And that kind of coincides with kind of a shift in the centers of internet culture, where the primary driver of internet culture in the early years was newsgroups. As time went on, that kind of shifted. There was a brief period in which it was sort of unclear where stuff was coming from. Stuff was coming from a lot of different places. And then by the end of the 2000s, 4chan is kind of dominant as being where things originate. There are, of course, other places on the internet where memes start, but 4chan is kind of an engine for them, for better and for, frankly, mostly worse. But 4chan, of course, has a fondness for shock humor, and so there's a lot of that. So what's actually going on with this? Let's break down the humor to this a bit. I've talked a few times about the benign violation theory. Brief recap if you haven't seen one of the videos in which I talked about it. The benign violation theory of humor is one of the leading psychological theories of where humor comes from, what makes things funny. The idea is that laughter is a response to a release of tension, and the particular kind of release of tension that we find funny in particular, because people laugh for different reasons. They laugh nervously, they laugh in relief. The particular release of tension that we interpret as humor is the release of a sense of wrongness or even fear. So benign violation is the primary source of humor. It's where we perceive something as being a violation. It's wrong. It's not how things work. But at the same time, or almost immediately after, we have reassurance that it is not threatening. That it is not going to harm us or anything or anyone we care about. And that makes it, that releases the tension and that creates the humor. So here, the main thing that keeps it in the realm of humor, first of all, it's not the violence itself that's funny. It's the reactions of the two characters. Carl is very nonchalant about his violence, and that makes it come across as, that primes us to see it as benign. He's not bothered by it, so there's a part of our brains that goes, well, maybe we shouldn't be either. Paul is greatly bothered by it, but his reaction is, to be peeved rather than frightened or angry so much as just annoyed. He is not responding to it like serious violence. He's responding to it like a parent group responding to cartoon violence, you know? It's a bad thing that he acknowledges is a bad thing, but it's not an actual threat. And so between those two reactions, our hindbrain sort of go, oh, this violence isn't a threat, therefore release of tension, let's laugh. That's probably why the episode in which Paul doesn't appear is by far the least funny one. And I'm counting the Paul mask that acts like Paul as being in some sense Paul, even though it's a projected hallucination of Carl's. It fulfills the Paul role well enough that it doesn't impact the humor the way the sheep in the Paul mask does kind of remove one of the legs on which the show stands. There's also a creeping element where over time it's becoming more of a violation and less benign. Where you can see it with the end music, where with each successive episode, the end music is a little more out of tune, a little more creepy, and a little bit less cheerful through as the series goes on. Then by episode 12, it goes back to that original kind of cheerful, on-key that it was in the first episode. And that is, of course, because now that now that Carl and seemingly everyone else in the world is dead, there's no longer any residual wrongness. Everything is wiped clean. And so we can go back to the cheerfulness. So what is going on with that progression? The last episode is kind of the peak of it. The bulk of the last episode is kind of peak wrongness, and it's really not funny at all. There's no humor in the last episode, really, to speak of. And there's declining amounts of humor for several episodes before that. The series really kind of peaks with the nuke. And it acknowledges that. Like, that's hard to top after that point. And the series just can't keep escalating. So instead of escalating the scale of the violence, it focuses more and more on the weirdness, which is a form of violation and can be used to generate humor. The benign weirdness of something like Adventure Time is a great source of humor. Unfortunately, the weirdness in this isn't really benign. It's repeatedly shown to be, the source of the violation. It's threatening humor. It's the reason Paul kills. The reason Carl kills. And so it really isn't humorous to accentuate that. And so the series kind of decays with time. There's not much really to do with that issue, unfortunately. It kind of writes itself into a corner because all it can do is keep escalating, and eventually it reaches a peak of escalation and has nowhere to go. Which is, of course, Carl's problem as well. Yeah. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's decent for what it is. It's 2000 teens internet humor. It at least manages to not be, racist or misogynistic. It's got a couple of really good lines in it. The best part of it, again, this is peaking at episode 4, the best part of it is definitely Carl's "I don't know how you keep forgetting that, Paul," which kind of, poking fun at the whole underlying premise of the whole thing, that Paul's understated reactions, Carl's too, are kind of where the humor is coming from. But again, not really anywhere to go from there. So in that sense, it's also pretty standard for 2010's internet humor, in that it goes on well past its expiration date, and kind of stretches the thing out past where really it would be comfortable being. Yeah. I think that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to vlogs, Let's Plays, essays, and more. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!